Live. Oh, and I'm not ready. I'm sorry about this. And Phil, if you're watching, good to see you. We're going to try and struggle on without you. And we miss your money. But anyway, there you go. So it's very nice to see you all. Thank you all very much for coming. I always start with this question. How many of you been to a health chat before? Okay, fine. So I don't really need to explain any, do I? It's you. I have to explain it all to you.
I can pick it up as you go along.
I don't know. Who is this? Jeremy Gray. Right. For Jeremy Gray and people on people on Periscope, we try and bring the big names of the health service to a bit closer to the front line, so we can hear. It's not just about health and health policy; it's about them and their persons and their backgrounds and their careers and their attitudes, and we just have a chat. Really, it's just like having a chat. We couldn't do it, of course, without the help of our sponsors. We've got the fabulous Interserve, who've looked after us for a whole series, and we're very grateful to them, and of course Salix, who run our front of house. So that's our little advert for them as well. So I think probably without any more ado, we're very fortunate. Sometimes you need a bit of luck in life, and we've got a bit of luck tonight. You need to get the right guest at the right time. And if there was ever more a right time to talk about nursing than it's now. And so will you please welcome the very new to the post, but certainly not new to the RCN, the boss of the RCN, Janet Davies. Please welcome. Now,
first challenge is getting on the stool.
Yes, I did. There is a story about Claire Girarder who turned up with a skirt about the size of a pelmet, and it was some gentlemen of a certain age in the front row had a bit of a conniption. And we're sponsored tonight by Kleenex because Janet, she's going to reduce me to tears. No, poor Janet has got a bit of a cold. We wouldn't call it man flu.
Woman flu.
Yeah, you've got to be very careful.
But I've had my flu jab, of course.
Have you had a flu jab? I had a flu jab for 2 years running, was ill after it, and they all said it can't make you ill, but I'm not having another. But I shouldn't say that.
No, you should use the evidence. Evidence.
Okay, but it's okay. But as far as our broadcasting is concerned, of course, everyone should have a flu jab. It's jolly good for you. Right, welcome.
Thank you.
How are things? You've been to the chief nurses do up in Brum today.
I have. Well, I was there
How
last
was
night.
It?
I was there last night, so I wasn't actually at the whole function itself.
Was it a very swish dinner?
No, it was a buffet with finger food last night. Nothing too swish.
Really?
Yeah, no, it was, and it was very much about people chatting to each other, talking to the. It was really.
What's the gossip? What's the big?
The big issues are the things that are the big things for everyone, really. I mean, I guess it's making ends meet, getting staff. The chief nurses of the provider organisations desperately short-staffed. Where they're going to get the staff from, and then all the controversy around, band fours and bursaries. Yeah. I mean, that's the big issue at the moment, of course, as we all know. And it's of the moment. So that was the conversation, and not actually a united opinion at the moment. So that was also very interesting on the division of opinion. But people up for making it, carrying on, making it happen. Still lots of commitment to their work. And
how's Jane settling in? She went through a bit of a
I think it's
period.
a really tough job, I think, I don't think we can be critical of people in these positions at the moment, because we're working in an environment really where I'm not sure who's being listened to and how much impact we can make. And I do think we have an issue on how a nurse is being valued. And we've all got a role to play, I think, improving the worth of nurses. And I just think it's a hard gig. I don't envy her, actually. It's much easier for me to be able to say what I want and what our members want to say. I mean, I've got the strength of 430,000 members who are helping me do my job. It must be a pretty lonely job.
And yeah, I see on your blog you've just written to them all, haven't you, saying, what do you think? Anyway,
we'll
come to that.
Yeah.
Let's start at the beginning. What brought you into nursing? Were you a little girl that bandaged up her teddy?
No, I wasn't actually. It's very interesting. I mean, I made a decision to go into nursing, quite early, because I started nursing at 17. So I actually left school and didn't do my A-levels in a bit of a fitting peak, and wanted to go into nursing. I managed to start at 17 because my birthday started within the first 6 weeks.
So were you a cadet? Were they
No.
cadets?
I was allowed to start my training because I was 18 before I actually worked on the wards.
Where
so
was that?
It
was up
at Manchester, South Manchester.
Yeah, I was up there last night.
Were you?
And they were talking about you.
Yeah,
because they knew I was talking to you today.
Yeah.
You are
Long time
remembered
ago.
fondly.
Yeah,
Fondly.
long time ago. I'm
Yeah.
sure they don't remember me.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
They're all retired and we're introduced.
So you went into, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because you went into nursing without much in the way of educational qualification.
Well, I went in with 10 O levels.
Yeah, 10.
10. Left school, decided
Kind
not
of
to do
average,
A
isn't
levels.
it? 10, really.
And
Seems
so
like a lot to me.
Certainly more than you.
So I made a choice, and my choice was to start nursing a year early because I knew I could.
Yeah.
I made a decision to do nursing probably only about a year before that.
But why? What? It
Well,
always interests me. Why?
Originally, I wanted to be an architect, and the more I looked at it, and the more I suddenly decided I wanted to do something that was a bit more worthwhile. And it sounds a bit cliched.
We apologise to any architects who.
And it does sound a bit cliched, but I wanted something that had more to do with people, actual contact with people, helping people. I think for the same motivation that nurses still come into nursing and the students I talk to, it's exactly the same motivation. It's, you know,
We'd call that
something is
vocation,
worthy.
would we?
Yeah, and I guess it is vocation, but we don't like the word vocation as nurses. I mean, it really is what brings us in, I think. But vocation means, well, you don't really have to get paid much because it's a vocation. It's sort of got that angel image, so it's a bit of a term that we have a bit of a love-hate relationship with.
Is that right?
It is.
I thought
It is.
vocation was a good word for that.
Well, it is a good word, but I think sometimes it gets, I think we feel sometimes it sort of downgrades what we are.
Yeah. Well,
But
you've
it's
been-
fine,
you've
it's
been-
just a vocation, you
okay.
don't have to be clever, that sort of
So
thing.
you were there for quite a while, I suppose. Did you become an SEN and then an SRN?
No, I
or-
did my registration.
Fine.
I
Yeah.
started my 3-year programme in the old state registered nurse with a school of nursing.
Yeah. So you trained at the hospital.
At the School of Nursing, so it wasn't just the hospital, but you see, of course, we had a health authority in those days.
Yes.
So
I used to
actually-
chair one of those.
Yeah, so you were employed by the health authority, you had a contract and you got paid, and you were the lowest person on that ward, really, as a student nurse, as a trainee, and you worked, and it was like an apprenticeship model, but you still had your blocks in that School of Nursing. So you weren't just in the hospital. I did health visiting, I did maternity, I did mental health, I did some health visiting, district nursing. So that would be across different organisations now. It was all one health authority. So it wasn't obviously like a degree, but actually the model we've got at the moment isn't that far removed. I think people think it's hugely different. It still is 50% in practice, and it still is practice placements like we had. It's just perhaps not as close as it was then.
And the syllabus is, of course, now vary, don't they, from university to university?
They do, and I do think that might be an issue. I think that we have the NMC standards, and I think the debate is still there on should we have a common curriculum. I think there are standards that the NMC have, and there is always this discussion about variation. But there's no proof that there's a variation, we've no measures that there's variation, but it does leave it open to interpretation at the moment.
You hear stories certainly about nurses going onto a ward who've never actually injected anything more than an orange. And all that
Yeah,
kind of
but
thing.
we've
Is that
got-
possible?
Well, it is possible because it depends on where their placements are, how many students are there, and what sort of opportunity they have in order to undertake those skills. And I think sometimes when we hear it, it's from people who perhaps haven't nursed practically themselves for a while, and maybe some of the things we do are different now. So, you know, they haven't done an intramuscular injection. Well, actually, they're not done very much anymore. We have much more intravenous therapy. Things are different. So I don't think we can actually always do that. But the other thing we've got to remember is that there is meant to be a year of preceptorship. So actually, at the end of your 3-year programme, you're not the finished article. Actually, I don't think we were. I think we were left to sink or swim. At least now, we're meant to have a year of preceptorship. And that's really important. That's about integrating yourself into the workforce. It's about, you know, finding your feet. It's about developing those skills that you may not have had during your training. I mean, I do appreciate that there might be something we need to do about some of those core skills. And I think the NMC are looking at that at the moment, because I think there is a push actually from nurses themselves and from our students. You know, we debate this quite a lot at our Congress, and I'm sure you've heard it, about, you know, should we have an exam that's the same, should we develop skills? And it's a debate, you know.
So
But I think the students can tell us.
well, I find that maybe the employers have got something to say
Yeah.
about it as well.
Well, they should have.
Yes, and perhaps they don't have enough to say. Anyway, we'll talk about that in a minute. So there you were in Manchester. So were your family nurses? Were your mum a nurse?
No, there was no nurses in my family at all. There was some ancient aunt who was a nurse in the First World War who I'd never met.
Yeah.
But that was the only nurse in the family. I had an uncle who was a doctor, but I'm not sure that particularly influenced my decision.
Yeah. So what was it like your first day on the ward? Do you remember it?
I do, and in fact, my mentor for my first placement is here tonight.
Oh wow, that's
Like,
good.
this is your life, isn't it?
Yes.
So Irene
Who's
Gray,
that? Irene?
who was
Hi,
Irene
Irene.
Wilson. I remember it distinctly because...
What was she like?
Amazing.
Ah, good answer.
You can't remember really, I'm absolutely sure. I actually found it very daunting. I actually think you can't underestimate what it's like to walk onto one, and it was a male medical ward. I was 17 years old. We had some guys on that ward who were troublesome, in a nice way, who liked to have a joke with the new students. I remember them pinning an L plate on my back, which was great fun, but I was a bit mortified because I was shy and I thought, oh my God. And you really, that responsibility as a student nurse in those days, I do think you were thrown into, you were part of the workforce and you didn't know what you were doing. I don't think it was a great idea. And I remember thinking, oh my God, have I done the right thing? And I did doubt it a few times.
Yeah.
All the way through my first year, I wasn't sure I really wanted to be a nurse. I think our students find that now, that, you know, what you think nursing's going to be, what it's really like, and when you're actually faced with that work, I think it's scary. And you know, there were good bits, there were bad bits, and of course we had the ward sisters in those days. Some of them could be terrible, some were great, and it really did make the difference on your mentor and who you had. And of course, Irene was a third year. She wasn't a registered nurse herself, so students help students. That was, you know, that was how it was. And I'm sure that was daunting for a third year as well. You know, it wasn't.
So then you
registered
qualified
nurse.
and you passed out, or whatever it was.
I did. I qualified.
Did you have one of those little belts with the silver?
No, we didn't. I was one of those people who had the national uniform. And in
Right.
fact, I was very envious of my mentor, Irene, because she had the old uniform with the pinny and the belt, and it looked lovely. And I had an overall, which was a national uniform.
Is it really?
I never thought it looked quite as good, you know.
Yeah,
But,
today they look like they've slept in a laundry basket and wrapped up in plastic.
and I do think that's one of the things that, you know, this whole valuing of nursing.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't, you know, I'm not saying let's go back to the aprons and things, it's so long ago now. But I do think, you know, even with that old overall, I remember when I started my training, before we even went anywhere, you went and you were measured. I think I was measured before I started, actually. I think we had to go somewhere for a day and have a medical and get measured for our uniform. Then I had this, you know, pile of uniforms that were mine with my name in and hats. And, you know, it was a great moment. You know, here's my uniform. And then you got it to the laundry because it was important for cross-infection. What do our students get now? 2? 1? What do our registered nurses get?
Well, you've seen them
1
on
or
the
2
wearing them
uniforms?
on the bus on the way.
Well, they have
home.
to take them home and wash them themselves, and I think, you know, it's not saying we go back to the old laundry days, but there is something about that you value it. You value your nurses, you value the support that you give them, and, you know, you're paying for them to have, you know, the right equipment to do the job. And so I don't think it's surprising sometimes that people don't work as smart as they can. It's not always the nurses themselves.
So how long were you there for?
I was there for, I was there for about just over 18 months since I qualified, but it was just about a year. And then I'd really enjoyed my mental health training, my mental health assignment, and decided actually I wanted to do my mental health training. So I went off to Lancaster and went to do my mental health training, which at that time was a shortened 18-month course. And of course it was really good to be able to do postgraduate education in those days. I was getting paid a salary to do that, and the NHS welcomed you doing a course, and I then qualified as a mental health nurse in Lancaster. But I actually made the decision at the end of that that actually it isn't where I wanted to stay. But actually those skills that you had from having both those qualifications, and many of my generation have done that, was fantastic. Was I wanted to work with older people, and actually the psychological needs, the psychiatric needs of older people, along with the generalness. I mean, I think it's gold dust.
Well, it brings us back to today, doesn't it? Where there's the parity of esteem and the parity of
absolutely.
access, and which I think, you know, the NHS is so scarred by the demarcation. I mean, I used to run mental health services, and it was, you know, you couldn't get medical services for people with mental health problems. It was There's something to be said for not having mental health services, I think, and just having you're ill.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's very special. I think it's an area I don't think we should. I think getting rid of that stigma, I think we're on our way. I think the stigma isn't. I mean, I still think there is a stigma. I don't think we've got rid of it completely, but I think it's so much better than it was.
There's certainly still
so much better than it was, and I think people recognise now that, you know, people have mental health problems. But I do think it's a specialty in its own right, and people deserve the best skills.
Yeah, but whether or
for
not
their
people need
problems.
to be in different buildings or not, I don't know. I was talking to Claire Modder. You know, Claire runs big mental health services in North London. You know, she's very interesting to talk to about this whole parity of steam thing. So okay, so
It's
then.
about having a therapeutic environment, though, isn't it?
Well,
So
it
the
is, but it
environment's
doesn't
gotta
have to be in a
therapeutic for your-
separate organisation, does
Well,
it?
I'm not sure that an acute hospital would be an appropriate place for people with.
Well, acute hospital is hardly an appropriate place for anybody, is
No.
it? Really, but anyway, let's not get stuck
Depends
on
on
that.
it depends. I think that
No,
depends.
absolutely not. No, anyway, so let's. He didn't come here to be massaged. So what happened then? There you are, 2 lots of qualifications.
Yeah, and I came back to South Manchester,
Yeah.
and I worked in a older people's ward. I went back to rehabilitation ward.
Was
and
that
then-
before we knew what dementia was?
No, we knew what dementia
Did
was.
we do that?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
We didn't manage it very well, but we knew what it was.
Yeah.
And probably wasn't as prevalent as it is now.
Yeah, we used to think
because-
Granny was a bit dotty, didn't we, years ago?
Yeah, I mean, we working in healthcare knew what dementia was. Perhaps, and I don't think it was as prevalent. I think the general population perhaps didn't, but it was perhaps people.
Was
were
it
still
prevalence
careful.
or just the fact that there are more older people? now?
More older people, I suspect,
Yeah.
and
As
more
a
older
percentage of the
people coming
population,
in.
I've no idea what the percentage are. But it's actually interesting
Yeah.
thing to look up. isn't
And
it?
also
If
people.
anybody on Periscope knows, they
Yeah,
can tell.
but people living with long-term conditions, which people didn't. I mean, in my lifetime, people died of things they now survive for a long time and live into old age. Some people survived cancers, but they didn't. I mean, I remember, I'm going to be like Granny here though, working on a renal ward where there was decisions made on who would have peritoneal dialysis. People didn't have kidney machines at home, there wasn't such a thing. You made human choices. And if you're over a certain age, you probably didn't get it because there was a young person needed it. It was really rationed. And, people live now into really old age. We had no such thing as transplants. And that's within my working lifetime. So it was a different world and we can't really compare it. So I think sometimes, when we look back and we try and compare it with now, it's absolutely impossible. So lots of people would not have survived, so therefore they didn't get dementia.
So what happened then?
So I worked there for a while, and interestingly, I went in as a ward sister. I had a ward sister's post before I went because I was made a ward sister quite early, and I think that's because, to be fair, I hope I'd got some talent, but actually I think it's because I was desperately interested in older people and it wasn't the most popular thing and they needed a ward sister, if the truth be known. But what I did do was we had a ward that was having some serious problems and I was asked to go in and manage that ward, and I have to say we had no staff. We had hardly, I think I was about 2 other registered nurses. It was impossible to provide care for those patients in the way we would want to. I've never felt stressed in my life. We had a fantastic professor of gerontology at that time who was a big supporter, who was campaigning with me to get more staff in, and we wrote to everybody, we did all sorts of things. It never really happened, and I got a better offer, and I'm sorry to say I didn't see it through. I left because it was going to kill me. I was going to end up giving bad care, so I really feel sympathy for people in that situation now, and I made that choice that there was a fantastic opportunity at Manchester Royal Infirmary to work on a nursing development unit, which was a professorial unit, which was 2 professors of nursing on a joint appointment to be the full-time sister with their part-time role. Fantastic opportunity for me, and it probably saved me. I think if I'd stayed on that ward and carried on, I would have ended up getting pretty de-skilled and pretty fed up. And whether I would have stayed in nursing or not, I don't know. But I made that choice to do something exciting, and it probably changed where I went in my career, that particular move, I think.
What did you do? What were you researching?
I wasn't researching,
What were they
basically.
researching?
Well, they were researching nursing models. So they were looking, it was at the time of the nursing process and nursing models and how we care for older people. It was an acute admission ward, but for older people. It was fantastic. We had 2 brilliant consultants on there, and we had ordinary students coming through, but we had university students coming through, which were a bit of a new breed from Manchester University. And I had 2 professors of nursing who were not only using it as a training place for students, but they were researching nursing models, what worked, etc. I was the jobbing full-time sister who worked as any other ward sister, sort of managing the rotas, getting things in. Well, maybe shared it a little bit, but I was sort of almost the NHS sister alongside the 2 academics. And we had fabulous staffing. I couldn't believe it. I mean, we had safe staffing levels, but we also had staffing levels which meant we could improve, we could, develop things. And I mean, I'd come from a terrible area that was had no investment, to a place that had really positive investment, and it just was amazing. The things you could do and the quality of care that's given. It was a bit of an eye-opener, really. It was great, really good experience. And it brought me back into nursing and being really passionate about it.
How long were you there?
I'm trying to think how long I was there. I was probably there for about 2 or 3 years, probably 2. And I started a degree at that time, part-time, because what I didn't, I think it might have been later, but what I did realise, which was actually really interesting, is that, I mean, I thought I knew quite a bit. I was quite proud of being a ward sister, and I started off thinking, oh God, you know, they're swanning off to the university all the time. They come back half-time, and I'm here, you know, supervising the meals, you can imagine, you know. And then I learned very quickly that, you know, I'd go on a ward round with one of them, and Karen Waters in particular, she's still working at Manchester Royal Infirmary, she's a specialist nurse there now. I didn't know what I didn't know, and I think that's we all have that. And I'd go on a ward round and I'd think, oh my God, I wish I knew that. And you know, her relationship with the medic, her relationship with the patient, she was one of the most caring, compassionate nurses, I have to say, and also one of the cleverest that I'd come across. And what became apparent is what her knowledge and her depth of knowledge and her understanding and her challenge meant. She was confident, she challenged the consultant a lot, she spoke out for the patient all the time, but she did it with underlying knowledge and confidence.
So you
and that affected her care.
You did your degree
and I just
in what?
thought, you know, I'm missing this. I did a degree in nursing studies.
Right.
I did it a bit later, but they put it in my mind.
Where did you do it?
I did it at Manchester.
Yeah.
I did it at Manchester Polytechnic. They had a degree. I got part funding from the NHS to do that.
In the good old days when you could get a bursary.
I know, yeah. Well, I did it. I mean, I was working. I did it. A lot of my time.
It's hard work, isn't it?
I did it on day release. So, you know, I was given that time by the NHS to do that, but obviously all the time was in your own time. But I think it made a difference to my practice, because that's why I really believe in graduate education, because that ability to challenge, that ability to rationalise, to look at the evidence, to use the evidence, to make a case.
So what was that
Really
qualification?
important. It was a BSc. It was a BSc Honours in Nursing Studies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what did you write your dissertation in? It
I
always interests me what people write their dissertations in.
Yes, I actually wrote it with patient data on their
Data? Oh
yeah.
my word.
We were looking at the data and then looking at the patient's perceptions of it themselves, and actually looking at what was going to make a difference to them, where they wanted to be, and actually looking at what we were providing and what they felt they needed. So stuff that we're still doing to this day. Great opportunity. Talk to different patients from different places. I don't think it's particularly good actually, but you know, it did get you to look at research, look at how that might. I mean, I think at bachelor's level at that point, it's about giving you those skills, the analytical skills, being able to, you know, look at it, and then conduct a small study. It was never going to be published or set the world alight, but it did the right thing for me, really.
So when did I'm just trying to think, when did the NHS in its wisdom decide that all nurses had to have degrees? When was that?
It's not that long ago actually, and it's different. It depends on where in the UK you want to be.
Yeah.
Because it happened in Wales beforehand. It's probably been on the cards for many, many years, but actually we've only actually had it in place about 2 or 3 years, so it's not that long.
Looking back over that bit of your career though, where you've done a solid foundation, haven't you? You've done effectively an apprenticeship, you decided it was what you wanted to do, you'd have a look at all aspects and the sort of nooks and crannies of nursing. Then you decided you wanted to improve yourself and your practice, and you went for a degree. What do you think? I mean, there's a criticism now, isn't there, of the all degree courses?
Yeah, but it's rubbish.
People come in and they don't really have
that criticism is absolute rubbish.
You think it's wrong?
I could take you. I mean,
but it's when you say it's right, but it is a criticism that hasn't gone away.
No, it hasn't, and I think it's born.
Why isn't it not
and it's ourselves. I mean, I think the nursing profession is a lot to blame for this as well, because you know, it wasn't like that in my day. Well, of course it wasn't. You know, I've already told you what it was like with patients, but we're not in the 1970s. We're not in the 1960s. We're in the 2015, and we're in a different world. And you know, what percentage of the population went to university? And now what percentage of the population got to university? Why would nursing be the one that isn't a good degree?
Yeah, I think.
And I just think,
why would you want your nurse to be less qualified than the girl on the checkout at Tesco's?
Exactly. And you know, nursing is not just about being nice and kind. That is vitally important, and it's absolutely the essence of nursing. It's about understanding what you're doing, why you're doing it, being able to rescue people if things are going wrong, being able to promote health with people, having difficult conversations, but understanding why you're doing it, using your evidence to get people better, but actually, even more importantly, which is what I think the degree gives you, is that confidence to challenge. Because where nursing goes wrong is when we don't challenge. If you see any scandal that we've had, wherever it is, it's because nursing have gone with the flow and they haven't challenged it. So a degree helps you with that, and that's what we want from our nurses. And I just think it's a whole women's issue. That why the hell would nurses not do a degree? You know, why not? We want the best, and I want a graduate nurse. And it's not saying that registered nurses before this hand aren't fantastic and competent. Of course they are. But I think we need to move forward.
Well, we're coming back now.
It's an old argument, and I'm sick of hearing it, really.
Well, it's an argument we're going to rerun with the Band 4.
Oh, I know, and it's populist, and it's I just don't get
Well,
it. And
Chief
it's
Nurse's idea.
Well, I'm not sure that's the case, and I think
And you heard it here first.
I don't think that's the case, and I don't know whose idea it was.
It's
There are
my
some directors of nursing. There are some directors of nursing who are backing this idea of having a second level nurse again, and it's because the what I'm hearing is because we can't get staff, and it's better to have someone. Why haven't we got staff? Because we cut the training places and we cut the posts. The RCM were living talking about this and said this is what was going to happen, and here we are, it's happened. So what's the answer? To get something different? It isn't.
Well,
really, is it?
I mean, we've got to come up with a. Well, I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting point. I mean, we either do more of the same but more of it, so we sort out health education, because at the moment the government throttle off the number of nurses in training because they only fund a certain number, and we know, don't we, that for every place there's 5 applicants or 4 applicants or whatever it is. More people want to be nurses than we can fund.
Well,
So,
that's not quite the case. That's the convenient
Is that
line
not true?
at the moment. The way it's always worked is the NHS decide how many they want, they put that number in, and that's the number they commission. And some years ago, they said how many they might want, and they cut it because they needed to balance the books. So
that was, let me just pick up on that point, because it's a very subtle point that some people might not realise. I mean, it was fundamentally when there was the big push to turn trusts into foundation trusts. They had to balance their books. Because 70% of your costs are staff, and that's mainly nurses, the easiest way to balance your books is to push down the number of people you forecast that you're going to have on the books. Then miraculously your books balance. Now that's a kind of accounting sleight of hand that you can sort of get away with, except that I don't think anybody really thought of the fact that the people who used to be the forerunners of health education in England were watching, and they said, oh, if you need fewer nurses, we can get fewer nurses courses. And so suddenly the NHS looked like it was going to be able to manage on fewer nurses or without expanding the number of nurses, but it was actually all about balancing the books.
It was all about balancing the books, and we're living with the consequences. So why would we invent something?
Well, we've had 2 hits, haven't we?
Yeah,
we
we
had
have.
that, and then we had
And
the
the
coalition.
2
The coalition cut everything
2
when they
billion
first
challenge.
came.
The Nicholson challenge we had. So we had the foundation trust balance, trying to get the
He
trust
doesn't
balance.
like it called the Nicholson challenge.
No, but they called it that at the time.
He sat in on that seat and
Yeah.
said, I wish they hadn't called it that.
So this is why we're in the pickle that we're in at the moment.
Yeah.
So why would
So
we then
what
invent
is the
second
way?
level nurse
Is
for
the
that?
way out of that at the moment is to go scratching around the world to bring in a lot of youngsters from Portugal
That's
who
the
get
short-termism of it. Isn't
well,
it?
they get homesick and go home, or we just shove a lot of healthcare assistants on the ward and keep our fingers crossed. I mean, what can we do? What is there to do? What would you want to see done in the short term within the finances we have?
There's a number of things we've got to do. First of all, let's have a look at the number of nurses that are leaving for a start. We know that we've got more nurses leaving the system at the moment.
Can I just stop you there? Because I think there's a bit, I'll come to that, but there's a bit before that. Because I think I'm right in saying that, is it a third of nurses who qualify never appear on the register?
I don't recognise that statistic. That sounds
the,
very, very high to me. I don't think that's the case.
But would you say a high percentage don't
I
go
don't
on the
think it's
register?
that high. I'd have to check. I don't know, but I don't think it's that high. And certainly that would be scandalous. I'm sure that's not the case. We'd have to check that out, but that looks very, very high to me.
Okay, well let's park that.
It depends on where, and they may be appearing on someone else's register, but unlikely because they have to be on our register first. So.
Yeah, but they get their nursing degree and then take their degree off somewhere else and never become a nurse.
Sometimes they do, but they don't. Nurses don't. Why would you do a degree in nursing if you just want a degree? You work in long hours.
Because it's free.
Oh, I don't think that's. I've not met a student at all that's like that, and I think any students that might be watching this will be going ballistic. I know they will. Why on earth would you do a long programme without the long holidays you get as a student? Why would you spend 50% of your time working with patients, which is not an easy task, as I remember, just to get a degree? Actually, there's lots of other degrees that are easy, and it isn't about a free degree. you know, you still have, yes, you get a bursary, but it's not huge. When you apply to do nursing, you apply to become a nurse. Nobody goes in just to say, oh, I want a degree, what shall I do it in? It's a very funny choice to do nursing. I think it's one of the hardest degrees. I mean, your friends are all going out and you're going on shift. They're all going out getting drunk, you're thinking, oh, I'm going to have a hangover in the morning, or I can't go out. And then they've got bar jobs to supplement their income. They have these lovely long holidays when nurses and student nurses are working on the wards in the communities with our patients. And it's not an easy degree, and I don't understand that. I think that's a populist argument used to get at nursing.
Okay, let's go back to what you were saying then about what do you think we should do that's practical and doable to get us out of this staffing mess?
First of all, it's a short-term issue.
Is
so
it?
rather than take...
How short is short-term?
Well, it takes 3 years to train nurses, doesn't it?
So it's just
So we're already beginning to catch up, we think. We're beginning to get numbers in. So why is there such a massive shortage? How long is it that people have been working on low dangerous staffing levels? Because it's a blimmin' large number that's suddenly appeared, isn't it? And so, yes, CQC have now come looking. We now, at last, understand that registered nurses make a difference to the outcomes. We're all on the same page. We've been saying this for a long time. We've got loads and loads of research. So at last, we've got this moment when staffing levels are being considered as important. CQC are coming in, so people are desperately trying to get them in. What it's saying is, we have been dangerously understaffed for a long time, which is exactly what our nurses have been telling us. Great, it's been recognised. What do we do? Oh, well, we don't want all these registered nurses.
The turning point was mid-staffs, wasn't it?
Of course it was. It
And
was.
Why were the nurses silent at mid-staffs?
I think you've got to understand the pressures that they've been under, and I think, you know, when I was talking about my career and working on that long stay older person's ward with no staff, you know, I could go in one morning and I've got one healthcare assistant and me and 20 heavily dependent old men. What was I meant to do with those people? That sort of thing was
Well, what
happening
happened
again
after you
at mid-staffs. Exactly, and I don't feel, I mean, I fought and fought and fought. I was obviously quite junior, and but I've not forgotten that. I do feel guilty that I left there, and I always did. In the end, they closed those wards, which was, you know, fantastic, and we've gone into a better place with how we care for our older people than we were in the 70s. So I've got this real big thing about don't bring back the 70s. It was shocking. And
mid-staffs,
the
nurses took the hit at mid-staffs.
They took the hit, but they were the end of the chain. So the problem we've got...
Soft target?
It's a very soft target, because whatever's happening through that whole chain of command, and whatever's creating that shocking culture, the way you see it is that interface with the patient.
Should the RCN have done more to have protected its front line then?
We did an awful lot to try and protect that front line, and we represented all those nurses who needed our help. And we've had, you know, quite a lot from
Without
nurses.
much success.
Well, you know, it was a feeding frenzy, wasn't it? And things were wrong. So I would never say that what happened to those patients was all right. It was not. And I am not actually defending what happened to mid-staffs at all. But we have to have an understanding of how it can go wrong for our nurses. And we have to have this adult conversation. It was shocking, and that should never happen to people. How do we help people? And there is that whole whistleblowing thing. And I think the RCN did not do enough about whistleblowing and supporting them. We've said it at the time, we'll say it now.
Well, we still do, don't we? I mean, the organisational dynamics behind whistleblowing are very complicated.
It is.
And I don't think that anything that Francis has done originally or since improves that. And,
I think
the arrangements now are that we've got somebody in hospitals that are funded by the very people who've caused the problems in the first place, and I don't really see that they're
But also you've got to see
independent.
what is whistleblowing. And actually what was happening is that things were being filed. So staff were filing incident forms, were finding complaints, and they went in a bin. We heard that. And we heard that in the Francis review. So people were doing the right thing, but it was getting blocked. It was getting blocked in the system. And people eventually give up. So that is where we come in about supporting those people. And we've held our hands up, and we've done a lot of work at the RCN since then on helping, supporting our reps. We've got mentorship, we've got support, we've got supervision of all our representatives. They have a training programme that's accredited, so they're getting a lot more support than they did in those days when this all happened, because we've recognised representatives need an awful lot of support. So there was an issue there, and I think everybody was failed, but they were failed by the system. It isn't the individual nurse.
What does, actually we've got way off beam here because I wanted to talk to you, because you ran an ambulance trust, didn't you?
I did.
So yeah, I want to get on that. I'll go back to that in a minute.
Had a little dalliance there, I think.
Little dalliance for the ambulance service. I mean, if we look at this whole safe staffing nonsense, you know, I mean, everybody here has either heard me talk about or written about, you know, if your kids in a nursery, there's a ratio between the healthcare assistant and the kids. If you're on a plane, there's a ratio between the cabin crew and the staff. If you're in a football ground, there's a ratio between the stewards and the spectators. And allied to that, an airline pilot can only fly 1,000 hours a year. Lorry drivers can only drive 9 hours a day, and we've got nurses that can do back-to-back 12 hours 3 times a week and work in a care home, and we still have a safe staffing regime where we wait for something to go wrong and wave a red flag. And I've seen it myself in a hospital on a Sunday afternoon. All hell broke loose when a couple of elderly ladies were admitted on a medical ward. Dementia, they kicked off. It was a nurse, and I mean the staffing levels were right, but there was a nurse there trying to do a drugs round. She was young, pretty experienced. The whole thing was just mayhem. She didn't know what to do, and the manager that was called didn't know what to do. And in the end, they got more staff off another ward and put them in until it all quieted down and left the other ward without the right staffing. I mean, it's a nonsense.
And that's about
how did the RCN go along with that?
Well, we didn't.
Well,
and we haven't
did.
done it. No, we haven't.
Well, you signed up. You were consultees on the safe staffing palaver from NICE.
We were, yes, but they've not been implemented. If we
Well, yeah, but you signed up to it originally. I mean, anybody with half a brain could see it was a load of crap.
Well, of course we'll sign up to something that's... I don't think it was a load of crap. It's just not been implemented. So of course we would.
But the red flag thing is a nonsense. It's a practical nonsense.
Why?
Well, because if something goes wrong, or there's a potential for something to go wrong, and you try and wave a red flag, in the practicality of the moment, at the timing of the shift, the day of the week, there isn't anything anyone can do. You wave a red flag until your flag drops off your stick.
But the responsibility of how you manage that area is to have a system for what happens when there is a red flag. So you should have that flexibility in the system that you can parachute someone in very quickly. How do you do it in an A&E department? How do you do it anywhere? If you suddenly had a major incident and you were having 20 people coming into a hospital with serious injuries, you don't wave a red flag and say there's nothing we can do about it, do you? You actually have a whole contingency plan to deal with it. So what do you do with a red flag? You have a contingency plan. But that's the responsibility of those people to make sure there's a contingency plan, and that's why red flags are important. And that's why safe staffing is important.
Wouldn't it be better just to have a much better appreciation of what the ratio should be? I mean, I don't know if you want to go as far as California, where there's a law, or New Zealand, where there's a law, or do you go into other states where there's a staff council and their recommendations are mandated on the board? I mean, and safe staffing's been dropped now, hasn't it?
Well, it's not been dropped. It's allegedly still happening. Allegedly, we're still looking at it.
But the famous Five Monitor, the TDA, and the other Mickey Mouse people, they all signed up to something and saying that we won't hold you to account for safe starving. And
they've not said that.
I mean, it's a mess.
It is a mess. It is a mess, and we'll absolutely agree.
But what are the nurse directors doing about it? I mean, for God's sake, what's the point of having a nurse director on a trust if they're just going to sit and watch all this happen?
What the nurse directors are telling me is that they can't get the staff. So we know we're in this hiatus. So it's going back to the point we had earlier. We've cut all those staffing levels, we've cut the training places, and we've been left with the consequence that the RCN were told we were scaremongering when we actually highlighted this some time ago. The RCN were the lone voice before mid-staff. We were the only people saying this. And I remember sitting in some TV studio being told I was a scaremonger that this wouldn't happen. Well, it's happened, and this is where we are. It's something of our own making.
But we are no further forward.
We're not further forward, and we're not further forward. The answer is to
where's
have more
the RCN?
staff.
Is the RCN a trade union or a Royal College?
We're both.
Well, what are you doing about it?
We're both. Well, you know what we're doing. We backed we backed the whole issue of NICE. We've called for independent staffing levels. We are pushing for safe staffing levels. We're talking to nurse directors. We've made very, very explicit about what we think. We're holding that to account, and we're trying to put pressure on the ministers. But what have we got now? We've got a whole different, we'll lift the cap off students by getting them to pay for their programme, which actually isn't going to bring more staff in at all. There's no logic to that at all.
It's interesting that, though, isn't it?
Because actually what you've done is taken the funding out into savings, which is for the staff for the NHS, when actually what we're saying is we're very short of staff for the NHS.
It's interesting with what's happened, though. It's Leicester, isn't it? That I was with the chief executive last night, and she was saying that they've got, in the first cohort, I think, when they first did it, they had 1,000, I think, applications for a non-commissioned course, 1,000 applications for 25 places, and they've since gone on. What is it now?
Bolton.
It's Bolton University. It's Bolton University, and they've since gone on. I think she was saying that they had about another 800 coming in. I mean, there's no shortage of people who are prepared to take on student debt to become a nurse. Now, I know absolutely. I mean, if it were I've never been to university. I mean, I grew up at a time when the prospect of going to university was just you couldn't do it as a working class family. No one ever did it. But I mean, I believe that all education should be free, including adult education. But you know, we've moved on from those times, and in the practicality of the moment, the ending of the bursaries, the prediction is, well, no one's going to want to be a nurse. But actually, the actuality of that is that's not true.
We're simplifying things very much here. So the system at Preston, and I have met with those students, is very different. I mean, it's not just about paying. Yes, they are paying, so they've got a student loan. So those people who are on that programme have got a student loan. What they have got is they are applying to that hospital to do a programme that that hospital have designed. That's partly the big attraction when you talk to them. They are being guaranteed a job at the end of that if they qualify, and they're getting paid for HCA work. So, you know, it's not just actually.
That's pretty good, isn't it?
It's a great deal, and it's something that's been designed.
Would you like to see that run out across the country?
Well, it can't be like that all over the country because that is on top of the students. They also have. They're not the only students they have. They also have students coming through the university system. But if we're serious about the 5-year forward view, if we're serious about integrated care, if we're serious about moving care into the community, then students cannot be based on training in hospitals all the time. We have to look at their experience in GP surgeries, in community. So it's a whole system approach. So the health service has to own it, not individual employers. And it's a great scheme, and it's a great scheme for them, but it's not an
But if you look at the future of the health service, you know, with vertically integrated care, with vanguards and so on, it's not inconceivable that the training could stretch into the community and into.
Well, it does at the moment. It does at the moment. But what you're trying to do is what other people have done is say this great programme that's taken a lot of care by Preston and Bolton means that people are willing to pay. Actually, there's a lot more to it. They're not just applying to a university. So, oh yeah, I'll pay. There's much more to it, and there's much more on offer. And actually, it's a small cohort that feel owned by their place. They're wearing a hospital uniform. It's all these things that are attracting them.
Well, rather like you started wearing a hospital
Exactly,
uniform.
but there are people who are not able to get on that programme, and this is where it all goes horribly wrong.
But there are people that can't get on the government programme.
But there are people who can get on the government programme.
And a lot can't.
But only partly because of numbers, so we can lift that to a certain extent. But some of the people who access nurse training at the moment are, first of all, it's a second career. So I chose to be a nurse at 17. Many nurses actually now, students choose to do that as a second career. They've already got their second career.
I picked up a figure, it was the average age I was 28 and they have 2 kids.
I was around that. So
Yeah.
that's the average. So we do have 18-year-olds, and obviously we want people to come to nursing when they leave school. But some of those people might be prepared to pay. Our current students are telling us, absolutely no way. All that work, all that, all that experience I give, all that time I give up, I wouldn't have done it.
So what is the position? What is the
but
RCN's position on this? I mean, I don't get a lot of clarity from what you're saying. What the RCN's position on non-commissioned nurse training is what?
I think there are certain models that people are working with that might work for some people, but it certainly wouldn't work for everybody. And we need to look first of all at why would they do that. We know our current students. I'm really proud of our current students at the moment. They're absolutely up in arms about this, and it's not going to affect them. So it's not self-interest. They won't. They've got their training, but they can see, and they're the people to talk to. They know what it's like. I don't know what it's like. I was a student in the 1970s, and they are saying this would make it impossible. We should listen to them. They're telling me all these stories about why they wouldn't have gone into nursing. There are also a significant number who would not be eligible for a loan. So if you are, so I've just been talking about a second career. People make fantastic nurses. It doesn't mean that any are better than others, but we have quite a number of people now who've had some sort of life experience, or they've thought about it, they don't like the career, and they want to be a nurse. They've got exactly the right qualities. They're kind, they're compassionate, they've got the ability, and they can access nurse education at a degree level, they would not be able to get a bursary. They may have got a degree already. If you've got a first degree, they might not be able to get a loan. If you've got a first degree, you can't necessarily get a loan for a second. If you've already gone through the system since we've had the loan system in, you can't have the second one. Some of our senior healthcare assistants who might have done a higher education programme can't access loans. The restrictions on student loans would prevent some of the very, very, very best people coming into nursing. And if some of the people that we talk to, some of our students, they've always wanted to be a nurse. Well, they have their family. They are sitting there in their 30s maybe, they've got children, they're paying for childcare, they've got a mortgage. It's fantastic to get these people into nursing, and our current system enables these people who've got fantastic capacity to go and get a degree. This is empowering people, proper graduate education to be a fantastic nurse for our society. They would be totally excluded. Why would you saddle yourself at that age with a huge debt on top of your mortgage, on top of your childcare?
Because you want to, I guess.
Well, I think that's very. I don't think that stands. I think you'd have to really think twice.
You want to.
Of course, what will they end up doing?
It's not pejorative to say that. People do it because they want to do it.
We've got to be realistic about people's finances. How much debt are you willing to go in?
Should the RCN do
should we be encouraging that? No, we don't do bursaries. We do bursaries for further education. We do some bursaries. We do a small number. We certainly could probably not provide a bursary for the whole of people qualifying to be training to be a nurse. We have a hardship fund, and we help people with debt advice. So we know that nurses are already sitting on quite a lot of debt. Nurses aren't particularly well paid. Lots of them have families. Lots of them are the main bread, earner in that in society. And if they're coming in thinking, I'd like to be a nurse, and we're allowing lots of people to do it, we have spent years widening the access to nursing. So actually, when I started nursing, we were nearly all 17, 18. We had a couple of older people. We have spent years broadening that entry for nurses to get the very best into our profession, and we're closing it like that. I can't see people. They would think so.
So what are you going to do?
Are you going to really take £60,000 on top of that?
What are you going to do then? Are you going? I read in your blog this morning that you say you've been enthusiastically opposing the government's proposals. Are they going out to the non-bursary? Is that going out, or the bursary? Is that going out to consultation, or is it a done deal?
There's a bit of a funny thing about consultation at the moment.
Well,
because allegedly there's going to be a consultation, but the Chancellor's made the decision to take the money away. So I'm not sure what we're consulting on. What we need to do is, if that decision has been made, then obviously we've got to object that, if we've got a health service that depends on our future, why would we take all that money away? I mean, I just think it's outrageous.
Well, it is a done deal, isn't it? There's not much you can do.
It seems to be a done deal, and we weren't consulted.
There's a petition, isn't there?
Our students, they're coming straight away. Our students, they've started the petition. They got those numbers. I mean,
I checked it this morning. It's got 110,000 signatures already.
Well, they got 100,000 very, very quickly. We'll get more.
I think they're stuck on 100,000.
We'll get more. But I think
let's wind the clock back, because I'd like to know really, how did the nurse end up running an ambulance service? When was your transition into management? How did that happen?
Well, that was a little bit of I think lots of us that are managers have that same experience, really, and I think there was a moment when I was getting a bit fed up of what was stopping us from doing what we needed to do. And I did have, in central Manchester, there was a great director of nursing at that time, and I think I was probably whinging one time too many. And they said, well, if you think you can do better, why don't you have a go at this? So actually, I was put into an acting management post to say, well, stop complaining and have a go at it. And I was up for that challenge, and it was tough. And it was a lesson, that actually it's not very easy doing that. And then so I enjoyed that, and then I did apply for the old nursing officer post and worked in Stockport for a while. And then I did a bit of a switch for a little while. I then got a job as that actually had me ward based, but I managed 3 wards. So you still have you have the benefit of clinical practice and some supervision. And it was working with acute admission for older people, and so I was supervising students as well as having a foot in both camps, so to speak, and that was really good. And then I was approached about a job managing a small a whole unit of central Manchester from someone I'd worked with before, and I applied for that job, and it sort of went from there really. So it was never really planned. None of my career's been planned. There's been an opportunity and I've taken it. Some has been fantastic, some of it's been less than
it's been like that. I'm still trying to decide what it is I want to do.
Maybe I am too.
Yeah, so,
maybe I'll have to
okay, so come on in. Tell us all about the ambulance service. How the hell did it, have you driven an ambulance with a blue light on?
No, I haven't. I've been a passenger, of course.
That's a lifetime ambition.
And I've third manned in my useless way.
Yeah. How did you get the job running an
ambulance? Well, that was
service?
an interesting one. And I was director of nursing at the time at the Royal Liverpool Hospital, and there had been some issues in the ambulance service at that time. And someone who'd been dealing with that problem actually just threw away a comment to me and said, I thought of maybe going to looking at that job in the ambulance service. And I thought, why not? What I think of that? I would never have thought of it. And then he said, have a look at it and have a look at what it's about. And it was intriguing, really, and it was fascinating. It was a service that was in trouble. It had a hard time.
Was it a trust?
It was a trust,
yeah.
And it had a culture that was problematic. They wanted a change in culture.
It's a bit of a canteen uniform culture, isn't it?
It's a challenging culture, and
they always look peculiar to me when they're. I mean, I know they're the paramedic greens. I understand that, but when they have ambulance officers, don't they? And they wear uniforms and caps and they have scrambled egg round their hat and all the rest of it. They can't make up their minds if they're a policeman or an ambulance.
It's a culture that's very different, and I personally think it gets in the way. What is really impressive about the ambulance service is the clinical commitment of those staff.
And they're always in the forefront of
and they are so professional when they're with patients. But then their behaviour sometimes when you're trying to move things and change things was very different. And so it was a bit of a shock. But you could never fault their patient focus.
Yeah.
It was fantastic. But there were lots of things. That was a fantastic learning curve for me. I think...
Did you sort them out?
No, I mean, I think we made a difference. I mean, one of the things...
You strike me as being a take-no-prisoner manager.
I mean, I was a bit of a shock.
I don't think you do warm and cuddly.
Well, I can do if I need to. And I think... I don't know.
think so.
Do you know, I don't know, maybe some of... You should ask the team I work with, and you should ask some of the people I've been there. I mean, one of the things that...
I think you're a Doc Martin, man.
Yeah, I don't think that's the case. I mean, I think we've had enough of that. The ambulance service was the last thing we needed. It was a bit complicated. I think the thing to do is to actually get the staff involved.
Were you the first woman to run I
think I was the second. I was the first in a major city.
Yes, I mean, I do not wish to condemn the fine profession of paramedics if anyone's listening, but I would imagine they didn't take kindly to some nurse turning up to sort them out.
One of the things that was well received was that our female paramedics, which are nearly 50% these days, were very pleased to have someone who might have a different culture, less of the old boys thing. Actually, the focus on clinical practice was very popular. The biggest problem we had in the ambulance service was with targets, and that whole drive of targets, which didn't always make sense. Of course, if you're seriously ill, you need an ambulance quickly. But some of the perverse incentives that we had in that time actually fostered bad behaviour and gaming, and it was very, very difficult. And at the time we didn't have the technology, and some of the logic was crazy. And that actually was probably...
Because the targets were put in place before GPS was an ambulance, wasn't it?
It was, so they made it up.
Yeah.
So, you pressed a button when you were there. So you could press it at any point and nobody could know whether people were there or not. Well, it's a great protest, isn't it? So if they think things are all right, they seem to be getting there very quickly. And suddenly, if you've made a decision, you'd know very quickly, particularly with a certain area of Liverpool, which used to be the first test, that suddenly your targets might not be right, but then you know that they're somewhere, or someone's seen them somewhere and it's actually not on the radio. And then it becomes, but then if you're not careful, if you're not trusting your staff, and then you start checking it up, then you recreate that culture. So breaking that cycle is quite tough. But what we did do, and the things I am proud of, was looking at alternatives. So, we had people doing programs at university for the first time. We had emergency practitioners very early. We had work across the system. We had social workers on ambulances, we had cars that went to the less urgent cases, we had direct referrals to district nurses in some areas, and what we did is we got our ambulance officers, as you call them, they were area managers, I called them, we got them working with the PCTs in that time. So they were all assigned PCTs and they worked the whole system and tried to find some sort of... So we did a lot of really good things, but we never achieved our target. We never hit that 8-minute target. And we hit it all the time in the urban area, and in Cheshire, which was very rural, it was almost impossible. And the culture at the time, was appalling really. So I remember on a Sunday getting rung up by the Department of Health saying, have you seen your figures? You know, they're watching it on a Sunday. What are you going to do about it? And you know, someone's fallen off a horse up on the hillside somewhere. I'm not going to get there in 8 minutes. We had voluntary response. We had the whole thing. There's no point in ringing me on a Sunday and get me worked up about it because there wasn't really much I can do about it. And of course, the more of an urban area you have, the more chance you have, and it's all fixed. But the one that really came to me, and I'll never forget it because it was at that point when I also thought, you know, this isn't really for the long term. I'll go mad. I was being accused, I think, of fiddling the figures, and they were going to have this inquiry, and they brought someone in to have a look at it. And we had, at the time, this is the technology, because we hadn't got the whole GPS thing going, so we had our controllers who were measuring it, and we had a different time on the computer than on the clock on the wall, and it was out by 0.01 of a second, I think, and that was considered how we could be fixing it. It was less than a second anyway, and it was, you know, how could they possibly think that was purposeful, and that some people were using the clock, some people were using that. Would that have made a difference to someone surviving or getting an ambulance statement? It's not. And the thing that really baffled me was we weren't even hitting our targets. So I did say, if I was going to fiddle figures, at least I'd have achieved the targets. So we mustn't fiddle it and not be meeting them. And at that point, I realised the world had gone mad, and I think whoever you talk to about some of the behaviours that targets create, for me, that was the most obvious.
I've always thought that the ambulance services are always at the leading edge of the clinical thing, aren't they?
Yeah.
And they've been very creative. I remember in the early days of Trust, where some of them used to service their own ambulances and then get local vans in, and they opened their garages and they ran servicing for the local communities as income generators and all the rest of it. I mean, they're always absolutely at the leading edge, but
hopefully they were doing it.
London Ambulance Service is in a mess now, isn't it? They've got special measures.
I think, you know, what chance have they got in London? You know, getting there somewhere in 8 minutes across London. Can you imagine? Have you seen the ambulances struggling to get? I feel for them every time I see them.
You can't get there in a taxi.
But also they're very, very short of paramedics.
25 quid,
Very short of paramedics. I'm here representing nurses.
Well, they're coming from Australia, aren't they?
But the banding that paramedics run with what they do, I think it's ridiculous. They are, band 5, band 6 at the very, very most, and you expect them to live in London?
Degrees.
But let's face it, you know, look at what they're doing, and it is pretty outrageous. And
so what would you do?
Well, London's got a specific problem. First of all, you'd pay them for what they do, as you would all healthcare professionals.
So what would you change the targets?
I think you have to have different targets about clinical
The problem with if
you have to be there in 8 minutes.
If you change a target, it looks like you surrender. I mean, it's a bit like the CQC. I mean, we all know the CQC is a basket case and contributes bugger all. But the Secretary of State can't get rid of the CQC because it looks like he's not interested in quality. If you get rid of the ambulance targets, it looks like you're not interested in getting there quickly enough.
There is something about sensible
We
targets.
need another narrative.
I've not worked for the ambulance service now for 10 years, so I'm not able to comment on that, and somebody else would be better to do it. And they've probably changed them since my day. I've not kept up to date with it.
They've made them worse, haven't they? Because it was 8 minutes from the assignment from the call handler to the ambulance, and now it's 8 minutes from when the phone's lifted up.
The first thing is that the reason for having it is that you must get an ambulance when you ring for it.
No, we all get why they're there. What I'm saying is that given the different conditions there are in different parts of the country,
but I'm not sure.
Shouldn't we just be measuring outcomes?
If you talk to a paramedic and you talk to a chief executive of an ambulance service now, are they purposely slowing things down? Or is the whole reason for them being to get someone who's ill very quickly? And there's something very demoralising about thinking you need to be told that that's what you've got to be doing, because that's all an ambulance service is working towards. And when one of the things that, you know, when you've got a car with a paramedic on, with the capability to probably put a patient in there if you really need to whiz them quickly, then why do you have another target to get an ambulance there as well? So there's all this sort of stuff. That might have changed, so I'm out of date, I'm not the right person to say, but it does really show how the target culture...
They've made the targets.
But actually with paramedics, you can't get a paramedic in London. How could you? Who's going to live in London? Look at the shifts that they work. Look at how they have to be close to the ambulance service. Who can afford to live in the middle of London on a paramedic salary?
So is the answer we're paying them more?
Of course it is.
And where is it? It's not going to happen, is it?
Well, and how are we ever going to improve?
Well, I mean,
You know, what do we want?
There's a lot of people that
So what do we want?
there's a lot of people that take the view that
Gotta make a
the
decision.
policy is driving the NHS into a cul-de-sac that is not
And
going
we've
to
got to
come out.
make a decision about being honest about what we're willing to pay for, if that's the case. So instead of blaming nurses, instead of blaming paramedics, instead of saying this case, we have to have the honest conversation. This is what we're going to pay. We don't actually want this many nurses. This is what you can expect.
I tell you what was interesting that I thought in Osborne's thing the other day, where he's now given social services or local authorities the ability to have 2% on their precept hypothecated for social care. Always, historically, they've been against hypothecation.
Yeah.
And one wonders really if it opens the door now to a hypothecation for health because we've slid down the European average.
We're very low.
We're, you know, and at one time we were bang on the
Yeah.
average.
Yeah.
So, you know, where is the other money going to come from? And I, you know, we're coming up to the end of our time, but I'm going to have to ask you have we got some on Twitter?
Oh, we got loads of. I've got 1,000,001 nursing questions.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Well, let's do Twitter, and then we'll come to the audience. Yeah, cool.
Quite a lot of people have been talking about. You made reference to care and compassion, and these are underlining fundamentals. But we're asking, do you think that's actually been detrimental potentially to recruiting nurses, to the value of nursing and degree programs, when it's all just costs nothing to care? It gets quoted an awful lot, and people are asking about
I
it.
think there's what value on care. So I think care is undervalued. I think everybody wants it, everybody talks about it, but I don't think it is valued. I think society think they value it, but we're not willing to pay for it, and we're not willing to see that actually you want care and you want people who know what they're doing. You want them with that education. I do think it suffers. I think it's there is a gender thing here about, you know, this is something anyone can do. It's these nice, kind women. I think we're going back there a little bit. I think we're getting a notch down a bit at the moment, so that we've been improving our lot, and it's going back quite heavily at the moment, I think. And I think there is an issue with that. However, that is very necessary. We shouldn't be ashamed of it.
No,
people come into nursing because they care, but I do think, it's seen as anybody can do it.
But the policy of potentially, it's been quoted here, the 6 C's, about how actually that is devaluing. You just talked about going back.
It's interesting, there's a mixed opinion on that, and we had a debate on that recently at the South Bank, actually, and Jane and I actually took the same side, which shocked everybody. But actually it was very interesting to hear what nurses themselves think about that. It's mixed. Some people love it and they want it to continue, and actually when they're now doing the strategy, quite a few people are saying that. I'm very open about it, and I think I was a bit cynical about it. I call it the 7th C, is cynicism. But maybe that's because I'm a bit long in the tooth. I don't know. It doesn't mean I was probably had the wrong reaction. People have actually embraced it, and some of our younger nurses and our newer nurses have embraced it. So I don't think we can knock it. And actually, I think one of the problems we've got as nurses is we criticise each other and ourselves. And I think if one thing that the RCN should do is bring everyone together. So you won't find me criticising any of the leaders, because we've got our leaders and we need to support them to do the job. We might not always like what each other does, but if we fight amongst ourselves, someone comes in and does it to us. So, you know, I think that's one thing. We've got 430,000 members who probably fight amongst each other all the time, but we've got to bring everybody together.
So what do we do, therefore, to stop the profession being seen as maybe going back 10 or 15 years, people are saying, in the perception of what nursing is about?
I think it is going back. I think they're absolutely right. And it's very interesting as we come to the 100th anniversary next year of the RCN and look at where we started and what a huge shift there's been and what a massive amount of progress. And I think with the situation at the moment where we've got something coming at us which isn't valuing what we've achieved over that time, it's difficult to know exactly what to do. I haven't got the answers as one individual. We're not being consulted on this as a college, but we have to be together. So we have to be united. At the moment, there's about 6 different messages coming from nursing. I can represent the message from our members. Our students have been amazing. They've come out straight away. And they know what they think about it. And they're the people who know best, because they're the people who've done it. But in the same time, we need to pull together and actually support each other.
Do you think, Janet, that... I know this is a question you answer on again because you speak about it on your blog, but do you think there is an issue really? I mean, I was there when Christine Hancock at Eastbourne, the RCN conference, where they surrendered the idea of not being a trades union, and the vote was taken, and there was a huge surprise in the I can remember it very clearly how it happened, and suddenly this Royal College became a trades union. Do you think you suffer from a sort of an internal and external schizophrenia about what are you? A trades union, or are you a Royal College?
I think it's a convenient argument for people. I think it's people not understanding what a trade union is, and I think someone has to speak up for nursing. And I think
on that basis, Unison can do what you do.
They can, and they do it well. I wouldn't knock Unison either. I think Gail Adams and her team at Unison are also doing very good things for nursing. It's a matter of choice. I'm not going to knock people. We have competition every now and again, but we also work together. The big thing about nursing is that the conditions in which people are nursed and cared for, and the people who give that care, have a direct impact on the care that's received. And it's very, very difficult to separate what we call positive practice environments, which is all about what trade unionism is. And people don't understand what trade unionism is. It's about positive practice environments, it's about safe workplaces, it's about good terms and conditions that support what you're doing. That has a direct impact, and the research is clear on the outcome for patients. So if we're going to be a true Royal College, you can't actually do that without looking at, well, how are nurses doing the jobs and how have they been able to do that and what are the conditions they're working in. So actually they go very, very much hand in hand. So I don't actually apologise at all for doing both, because I think they're absolutely together. How we manage it might be different, and we have to strengthen both elements of our...
Can you envisage
But nurses pay once and they get both. I think that's good value.
Can you envisage the RCN finding themselves in the predicament that the BMA are in now with the junior doctors?
Well, I don't know. It's interesting with the junior doctors, really. And why has that happened, and why was it so quick? Well, actually, how do you start a negotiation without anywhere to go to? So, to a certain extent, if you're faced with something that says, this is what you're getting, we'd like to talk to you, but we're not going to change it, this is what you're getting, then what do you do? So, I think,
the employers say they didn't say that, don't they?
I don't think the employers necessarily did say that, but I think that's what was the perception at that time of the Junior Doctors Committee of the BMA. So I think whatever their perception was, seems to be that actually you're not willing to talk to us, and they didn't know what else to do. So I think there's an element of, why have they done it? Why didn't they think there was an alternative?
And they're no further forward now.
So they seem to have thought, well, I don't know where they're up to actually.
Well, they've just parked everything until January the 13th.
But I do think that what drove them to do that, and there was obviously some sort of frustration that they didn't know what else to do. And I think that was the problem, because it felt to them, whether it's right or not, and I wouldn't comment, it's for them to comment, not me. But there was obviously a feeling that they hadn't got anything that they were going to be able to talk about. And I think that's what we heard from the junior doctors. And that's why they took that. I mean, but you'd have to talk to a junior doctor.
I think the strength of junior doctor opinion took everybody by surprise.
Yeah, I think it did.
98%.
I think it did. I think it did. But they're a distinct group. They're a distinct group who are together for a limited number of people, all in the same situation.
Exactly. They're an entirely...
but all in the same situation.
I know, and management don't get anywhere near them, and they're really peculiar people to manage.
Right,
has anybody got anything they want to add or say or comment they'd like to, anything that we haven't covered that you're going to go home and say, oh, what's that Royal anything else?
I think there is something, though, about, it sounded a bit doom and gloomish tonight, but actually...
No, it's
nurses are still very passionate about what they do, and, as I'm going out,
but they're
people
boxed
love
in,
their job.
They're boxed.
But I think at the moment, nurses are feeling undervalued, and I think we need to have something that is starting to value nurses and what they give.
Don't you feel, although you don't agree with a lot of it, the fact that there's so much churn in the thinking about where nurses come from, bringing them in overseas, having non-commissioned courses, the band 4, there's a lot of stuff going on, recognising the fact that we don't have enough nurses. I suppose your answer would be
that's their own making. Why?
Yeah, but we are where we are. So
we don't do it by having a different sort of nurse.
So to simplify that, you just say more money.
No, I didn't say. I said, don't take away the money we've already got. Not only is there no more money, we've just taken millions of pounds out of the education budget. So, not is it only about more.
But if that frees up the nursing places and there are more people.
But I think that's a very flawed argument, based on what evidence. We're meant to be an evidence-based profession, and actually what you're really doing, which is even more significant, it's terrible for us as a profession, I think, at the moment, but what it is doing is it's actually taking away the responsibility of the NHS.
But what are your options to resist it?
To train it. I don't know that we've got much to resist it. We can make the case we've got a parliamentary system This was not in anybody's manifesto. So we have had something come through comprehensive spending review that was in nobody's manifesto. And what is happening here is that it looks, at the moment, because with no detail, as if the NHS is absolving itself of its responsibility to create its workforce for
So
the
if we
future.
look at the tactics,
It's owned it to the market, hasn't it?
if the petition gains enough signatures, we could have a debate.
Exactly.
And if you have a debate, well, that might be. I don't think it's going to be on the house on the floor of the House, but. And the dichotomy here is it's a finance measure, so the House of Lords can't really knock it back because it's a finance measure. It can only be voted down by members on the floor of the House. Have you got enough support with members, do you think?
We've got the start of support, and this is only the start. This is very quick. It happened on Wednesday. Our students were quick off the block. We can now build on that. I think we need to build on. We need to have a debate about it because there's no real answer. Is this the case? And when would you ever, why would the NHS have nothing to do with the, we don't know what the model is, we don't know what the thinking is. Nobody's talked to any of us yet anyway, certainly. There's nothing out there about what this is. So all we know is, we'll open it up and it will be a loan system, but we don't know what the detail's going to be. And
it's not hard to imagine, is it? It's just going to be a student loan.
But we know, but not only is that going to prevent people from coming into nursing, and that is the people that I've talked about before, it's also taking away the responsibility for designing the workforce for our NHS away from the NHS and Department of Health. Because what they're saying is the market will sort it out. Do we really want the market to sort out the workforce of the future? And that's what's being said at the moment. And if they're lifting the cap on numbers, are they lifting the cap on the amount of money they're going to support in clinical placements?
You're right. It's hard to see how workforce planning fits into a market-driven system.
Yeah.
Well, look, we're going to have to stop, I'm afraid. Terry, you got anything else on?
No, lots of retweets, lots of interest. I think the trade union college thing potentially could.
Do you know what's something that's really interesting about that? When I got the job, I was actually at Congress, and one of our members came up to me and said, I'm really pleased you got the job. You're so strong on that Royal College bit. I'd be interested to see what you like on the trade union bit. And then about literally 5 minutes later, someone else came up to me and said, you are so strong on the trade union work. Interesting to see what you like with the Royal College. It's all in perception. If I'm talking about safe staffing levels and the lack of staff on the ward, am I talking because I'm a Royal College and about patient outcomes and the evidence, or am I talking as a trade union to make the place safe? We've got the wrong impression about trade unions, and we need to actually rehabilitate what's good about a trade union.
I'm a member of a trade union, a member of the NUJ. There you go. So there you are. Brother, comrade, sister, whatever. Anybody got anything they'd like to add, a comment they'd like to make, a question they're burning to ask? Yes, ma'am.
I just wondered, Simon Stevens, I think, identified...
Who?
The man. That the amount of money we're paying out for agencies, we could have 28,000 permanent nurses.
Exactly.
I just wonder what you feel about nurses being paid. You alluded to the fact that pay should be what we're short of. If we're talking about a marketplace, we are short of nurses. Should we be paying more? And should some areas be paid more than others? You can hear Agenda for Change is going out the window here, but it's about a rare commodity being rewarded because it's needed. How do you feel about the market force on nurses' salaries?
I think we need to. What's not been done is why people working on agencies. So who are these people first of all? So that we know there's a mix of people. There are some people who work for agencies exclusively. They do that because they get flexibility. They can work when they want to, 12-hour shifts, and you've got children you need to take to school or pick up in the morning. Are you going to do that, or are you going to work on an agency where you can do a half shift, or you can work in the evening, or you can work on a night, and you do it and pick and choose because there is lack of flexibility sometimes in the system which wants you to do that.
But hospitals could do that.
We could sort that out. Hospitals could sort that out, and they don't all do it. Some of them, and many agency staff, are staff already. So they're already working in that trust, and they come back even into the same ward sometimes as an agency nurse. And why are they doing that? Because there's no incentive to work extra hours. Hospitals have stopped paying overtime. You do overtime, extra hours at plain rate, or you can join the bank actually, and they just get plain rate. Why would you do that if you can work for an agency? This is market forces, So
It's about
sort
us
the
as an
reason
employer,
out.
isn't it? The NHS
yeah,
as
so
an
sort the
employer.
reason out.
I
But the
actually
other
read
thing
my
is-
blog tomorrow morning, and you'll find
And
out
how
all
many
about it.
hours are people
Yeah.
working? Because what the other thing we're hearing from nurses is that we've all done agency shifts at some point because we're going on a fancy holiday or we want to buy something. What we're hearing from nurses now is they're not working on agency for a luxury. They're working to pay the bills. They're paying for childcare because what they're taking home is not enough to meet their bills. So they're doing agency
And
shifts.
isn't it true, Janet, that the workplace has sort of changed, hasn't it? There
It's
is
frantic, I think. for
there
many
is
people, it's
much
frantic.
more, there's a greater flexibility as people live their lives differently now.
They do.
And so they want different jobs. It always amazes me. You go to hospitals, you say, "Where's the creche?" "Oh, we haven't got a creche."
Yeah.
But you've got 70% of your staff
Yeah.
are women. You know,
Yeah.
give me a break.
And when is it
We're
open?
just
If you've got one
crappy.
9 till 5?
The NHS, in many cases, just crappy employers. If you've got to go to the bank or to an agency because you can't do flexible staffing, you deserve all you get. It's just bad management.
And but what we need to do is we need to look at the cause. So I think
I'm
that's
gonna
it's
have
very
to
easy
wind
to
up.
get the solution without looking
Do
at
you
the cause.
think if we paid nurses more, we'd get more?
I
that
think
would
No.
solve a lot of our
I
problems?
think we wouldn't. I don't think we'd get
What do
more. I
you
don't think we'd lose as many.
Fine.
So it's the
Okay.
retention issue.
So it's
Yeah.
very
What is
careful.
what is the attrition rate?
It depends, it's
Are
very
you
hard to
starting
find.
to talk about that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
It's
we
very hard to
can't
find
do
the
a.
figures we've
I
got.
mean, we've done 5 years of effectively flatline
Yeah.
pay,
Yeah.
and the nurses are still with us.
Yeah.
Is that because
Not all nurses are still with us.
Well, but by and large, is it because?
No, I'm not sure that's the
Is
case.
it? Well, I just asked
They're
you
working
how
on
many.
agencies,
it's
we
a-
just heard.
Well,
We just heard about the
Well,
agency
I've just said some hospitals are crappy
Yeah.
employers, but
No, it's not
we've
always
had
that.
we've had 5 years of flatline increases or no increases, and the people are stuff. Is it because nursing is not as transferable? Because to be a nurse, you've got to work in a hospital or a care home. You're working. The place where you work is more constrained and defined, or is it because people just want to be a nurse?
That we've still got people.
Mm.
It's the job that keeps people.
Yeah, I can't think of another job where for 5 years people haven't had a pay rise. They say, "Well, stuff that. I'm going to go and do something else."
And quite a lot of
And-
people are saying that.
And we've got another,
Yeah.
but it looks like we've got another 5 years of it.
Well, I think we'll see how many we'll retain then. And I think the answer of bringing in people who are not recognised internationally. We've got the World Health Organisation saying a nurse should be a graduate.
Yeah.
We've got that all around the world, and suddenly for England, that invented nursing, to go the other way, it justifies all logic to me. We might get them in, but will we keep them?
I'm
And
going to
how
have
will
to
they be
stop.
treated?
You've overrun. It's such a gossip. Anybody else want to? Yeah, that was a good evening, wasn't it? You enjoyed that? Oh, sorry. Yes.
Just briefly, 2 health chats ago, Roy, you had the CEO of Addenbrooke's, the former CEO, and he
Yeah.
talked about safety as opposed to safe levels. And he talked about, he was criticising maternity and ITU. And his argument, he said to the CQC, was, wouldn't it be great if people had the same safety record that I have with my staff in there? And I just wondered if you had a comment on the quality of nursing as opposed to the numbers of nursing, bearing in mind your own experience.
Quality is vitally important, and having people who are able to do their job. So it is absolutely important. So it isn't just about numbers. So numbers are one of the things, but it isn't only that. It's having continuing education, it's having good appraisals, it's having support, it's having good working conditions that enables people. It's also about tackling bad performance. We need to tackle that.
How
Revalidation.
many
is
nurses
a great
have
thing.
an annual appraisal?
Well, not as many as should be, and we can see that in the. Well, we know what it is in the NHS. We don't know what it is elsewhere, and we see it in the reviews. They will. Yeah, they'll be having them in. There'll be lots of. Yeah, some places do it very well actually, and there are many. And actually, you're absolutely right. Independent sector, some fantastic things. Third sector, some great ones. The NHS don't do it very well. And actually, revalidation every 3 years, and people are saying it's going to cost money. Well, actually, that's a bit of an issue, isn't it? Why?
Oh, we didn't talk about revalidation, all that old rubbish, did we? What a lot of nonsense that is.
Obviously, if you're a profession, you have to. I mean, I'm not even going to rise to that. It's so obvious that we need to keep people up to date, and that we need to make sure that people are safe. It's obviously a step
I'd
in the
rather
right
guess
direction.
what we need to do. Janet, I'm really sorry, we're going to have to stop there. We're just before you go, we do have a little tradition with our guests. We have a little gift for you, which we'd like to accept.
Should I be worried?
Compliments. No. Well, it's John has it here, and John will present it to you in the way that only John can. It's a bottle of whiskey, which you might,
just right for my cold.
which is, exactly, but it's Welsh whiskey.
Oh,
The regulars
right.
will know that We think the
Thank
best
you
was
very much.
Janet's as
Thank
well.
you.
Really appreciate you coming.
And
Thank
the thing
you
about
very
it is,
much.
it's just over the limit where you have to declare it, so we get the fact that
Perfect.
you've been to us and we'll get in your books. But
It will be in the books that I have been tomorrow.
yeah,
You know, a
but
governance.
I hope you enjoy it.
as
It's the best whiskey in the world. Can we say, I think that was a fascinating, the hour and a half has just flown by, so thank you so much. It's been really interesting, and if you've been watching on Periscope, this stays live for another 24 hours.
24 hours.
And then we press the button, it disappears. So thank you for watching on Periscope if you have been. Janet, thank you for being such a very frank and really interesting guest. I'm so grateful. Thank you very much for
Thank
coming.
you.
Thank you.